Hey everyone, welcome back to Military Expert. Today we're looking at several aviation accidents caught on camera, and in some of them, the trouble begins before you even realize something is wrong. A normal takeoff, a routine approach, and then, without much warning, it becomes a plane crash. We'll go through what happened, what the pilots were dealing with, and what investigators later found. Alright, let's begin. July 30th, 2023, Upland, California. A Beech P-35 took off from Cable Airport and immediately entered a very steep climb. At around 300 to 400 feet above the ground, the left wing dropped. The airplane entered a nose-low spin and crashed into a hangar. All 3 people on board were killed. Investigators found no mechanical failure that would have prevented normal flight. The engine was still producing power. The NTSB concluded that the pilot exceeded the critical angle of attack, causing the airplane to stall. Why the aircraft was placed into such a steep climb could not be determined. At low altitude, controlling airspeed and angle of attack is critical because a stall may leave almost no time to recover. July 25th, 2023, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Shortly after takeoff, the experimental airplane lost airspeed during a low-altitude turn. The left wing dropped, and the aircraft crashed into a field. The pilot survived with minor injuries. The NTSB found no mechanical failure and concluded that the pilot exceeded the critical angle of attack, causing an aerodynamic stall. The lesson is to protect airspeed during low-altitude turns, where there may be very little room to recover. July 18th, 2023, Santa Fe, New Mexico. A Cessna 310 lost power in its left engine shortly after takeoff. The airplane could not climb, descended at low speed, and struck a house. The pilot was killed. The NTSB found that retaining rings inside the left engine had been installed incorrectly. This allowed crankshaft counterweights to separate, causing a total loss of engine power. The pilot also failed to maintain enough airspeed after the failure, which led to a loss of control. This accident shows why engine parts must be installed exactly as specified, and why, after losing one engine, protecting airspeed comes before trying to climb. July 18th, 2023, Eagle River, Wisconsin. A Piper PA-28 floated during landing, touched down too far along the runway, and could not stop in time. It left the runway and overturned in the grass. The pilot was seriously injured, and the passenger received minor injuries. The NTSB found no mechanical failure. The pilot did not maintain the proper approach speed, which led to the long touchdown and runway excursion. When an airplane floats past the planned touchdown point, the safer decision is to go around, rather than force the landing. July 9th, 2023, Waldorf, Maryland. During a Powerline inspection flight, a Hughes 369D developed an abnormal noise and vibration. A loud bang followed, and engine power was disconnected from the main transmission. The pilot entered autorotation and made a forced landing beside a residential pond. All 3 people on board received minor injuries. The NTSB found that the overrunning clutch failed from metal fatigue. It had been reassembled incorrectly after maintenance, and its outer race also contained pre-existing microcracks. Critical drivetrain components require exact reassembly, followed by an independent inspection. June 8th, 2019, Southold, New York. A Beech A-36 suffered a complete engine failure during a cross-country flight. The pilot tried to reach an open field, but the airplane entered a steep turn at low altitude and crashed. The pilot and passenger were killed. Investigators found that a main engine bearing had shifted, causing severe internal damage and the loss of power. Before the flight, metal had already been found in the oil filter, and a mechanic had repeatedly warned that the engine could fail. The airplane should not have flown with those warning signs. And after the engine stopped, maintaining a stable glide path was critical. July 20th, 2024, Telluride, Colorado. A Hawker 900 XP was not accelerating as expected during takeoff. The crew rejected the takeoff, but the jet ran off the runway and crossed the arresting area. Both pilots were uninjured. The NTSB found that the flaps were fully retracted instead of set to 15 degrees. The crew also attempted the takeoff with a tailwind above the airplane's limit and did not use the required checklists. At a high-density altitude airport, the airplane must be correctly configured before the takeoff roll begins, because there may be no runway left to correct the mistake. May 25th, 2023, Savannah, Georgia. During touch-and-go practice, the pilot felt a vibration from the nose landing gear. On the next landing, the gear collapsed during the rollout, and the Cirrus SR-20 stopped on the runway. The pilot was not injured. The NTSB confirmed that the nose gear failed, but the exact reason could not be determined, because the airplane was later destroyed in a hangar fire. An unexplained landing gear vibration should be treated as a warning of possible failure on the next landing. May 1st, 2023, Big Bear, California. A Beech A-36 was turning onto final when it slowed, rolled to the right, and crashed about half a mile from the runway. The pilot and 2 passengers were killed. Investigators found no mechanical failure before impact. The NTSB performance study said the airplane appeared to stall on short final. A 17-knot tailwind and the airport's high elevation may have made the ground speed look much higher than the actual airspeed. The NTSB has not yet published a final probable cause. On approach, ground speed can be misleading, but safe airspeed must still be maintained. May 1st, 2023, Batesville, Mississippi. A Cessna 182 bounced while landing in a gusting 20-knot crosswind and was pushed off the runway. During the attempted go-around, the engine sputtered and lost power. The airplane struck a drainage ditch, but both people on board were uninjured. The NTSB found no mechanical failure. The cause was the pilot's loss of control in the gusting crosswind, with the partial engine power loss contributing to the accident. When the crosswind is beyond the pilot's ability to maintain control, the approach should be abandoned before touchdown. April 2nd, 2023, Chelsea, Alabama. An Airbus EC-130T-2 air ambulance helicopter climbed rapidly from a low hover, rolled right, and pitched nose down into a road. The pilot and flight nurse were killed, and the flight paramedic was seriously injured. The NTSB found no mechanical failure. The pilot reacted too late to the developing loss of control, and his use of several sedating medications contributed to the delayed response. Sedating medication can reduce reaction time, and during low-altitude maneuvering, even a brief delay may leave no chance to recover. January 22nd, 2023, Tomball, Texas. A Beech M35 Bonanza lost all engine power during an aerial survey flight. The pilot landed on a highway, struck a semi-trailer, and hit the concrete median. Neither the pilot nor the truck driver was injured. Investigators found enough fuel on board and no mechanical failure that explained the power loss. The NTSB could not determine why the engine stopped. When engine power is lost over a populated area, maintaining control and selecting the safest available landing path becomes the priority. December 22nd, 2022, Santa Monica, California. A Cessna 150A lost all engine power after takeoff. The pilot attempted to land on the beach, but the airplane touched down near the water and overturned. The pilot received minor injuries, and the passenger was killed. The number 1 connecting rod bearing failed from oil starvation. Investigators could not determine why the oil starvation occurred. The unusual resistance noticed during taxi was likely the first sign of the engine failure, and the flight should not have continued until its cause was found. December 5th, 2022, Woodsfield, Ohio. After landing, a Kitfox S5 suddenly turned left and left the runway. It climbed a berm, became airborne again, and struck the ground with its right wing. Both people on board received minor injuries. The brakes were working normally. The NTSB concluded that the pilot failed to maintain directional control during the landing roll. Tailwheel airplanes require continuous directional control, even after the airplane appears to be safely on the runway. December 4th, 2022, Beverly, Massachusetts. A Cavalon gyroplane developed a strong left yaw during its initial climb, rolled completely to the right, and struck the runway. The pilot was killed. The NTSB found no mechanical failure. The pilot used improper yaw control, creating an excessive side slip that led to the loss of control. In a gyroplane, excessive side slip at low altitude can trigger a rapid roll, leaving almost no time to recover. November 26th, 2022, Suches, Georgia. An M24 Orion Plus gyroplane began takeoff from the middle of a grass runway with a tailwind. It climbed too slowly to clear the trees, and the pilot attempted to turn back. The gyroplane struck the brush, seriously injuring the passenger. The pilot was uninjured. The NTSB found no mechanical failure. The cause was the pilot's decision to depart from the runway midpoint with a tailwind. Using the full runway and taking off into the wind would have preserved the climb margin needed to clear the terrain. November 23rd, 2022, Oxford, Colorado. During a helicopter check ride, the examiner demonstrated a 180-degree autorotation. The descent became too rapid, and the flare was started too low. The helicopter struck the runway hard and rolled onto its left side. Both pilots were uninjured. The NTSB found no mechanical failure. The cause was the examiner's failure to maintain the proper descent during the practice autorotation. During autorotation training, the descent rate and flare height must remain controlled, because there may be no margin to correct a late flare. October 23rd, 2022, Lordstown, Ohio. Shortly after takeoff, a Stolp Starduster II developed violent shaking in the control stick as the elevator trim surfaces began to flutter. The pilot continued around the traffic pattern but flew slower than normal. During the turn from downwind to base, the airplane stalled and crashed. The pilot and passenger were seriously injured. The NTSB found that the elevator trim cable had been installed incorrectly and pulled free from its mount. The pilot's low airspeed and distraction from the control problem led to the loss of control. With abnormal control feedback, protecting airspeed remains critical.
Oh my God, he wrecked! Sue!
October 20th, 2019, Angel Fire, New Mexico. A Piper PA-24 took off from the mountain airport but could not gain enough altitude. The pilot headed toward a nearby road, apparently trying to land, then turned to avoid power lines. The airplane struck trees and a building. Both people on board were killed. Investigators found that the engine was still producing power and found no mechanical problem. The airport elevation, warm air, and gusting wind greatly reduced the airplane's ability to climb. The runway was long enough for takeoff, but the airplane did not have enough performance to safely climb away from the surrounding terrain.
In these, but the Avon, a remarkable engine, the Rolls-Royce Avon.
August 22nd, 2015, Shoreham, England. During an air show, a Hawker Hunter entered a rolling loop below the pilot's authorized minimum height, below his planned entry speed, and with less than full thrust. The jet reached only about 2,700 feet at the top of the maneuver, instead of the 3,500 feet needed for a safe recovery. The pilot continued downward instead of carrying out an escape maneuver, and the aircraft struck the A-27 road. 11 people on the ground were killed, and 13 others, including the pilot, were injured. When the required speed or height is missed, the maneuver must be abandoned immediately.
Everyone stay in your places, please. We'll be getting the emergency services in soon. Just stay where you are, please.
This side of the tree.